There are stories that drift through the rice fields, whispered between bamboo walls, carried by the wind through temple bells and banana trees. Stories not told aloud, but passed from lips trembling in fear, under breath, in the quiet hours before dawn. This is one of them. Welcome to Whispers of Asia, where forgotten rituals, ancient curses, and lingering spirits rise again beneath the full moon. Each tale you hear is drawn from the deepest shadows of Asian folklore, where tradition and terror are one and the same. Tonight, we travel to Northern Thailand, to a quiet temple hemmed by banana trees, where the spirit of a woman dressed in mourning waits, not to be remembered, but to be repaid. This is the story of grief left unspoken, of rites left undone, of a boy who became a monk not to serve the sacred, but to bury the guilt. This is the monk's banana leaf. The smoke rose in trembling ribbons, carrying the scent of sandalwood, ash, and sorrow. In the village of Ban Klung in the Lang, nestled beneath the green shoulders of northern Thailand's hills, funerals were not merely farewells, they were transitions. The dead did not leave until they were released. But that day, something felt unfinished. The funeral was rushed, too rushed. The rain had started early, and the monks were short on chant. The eldest of them, a man with lips stained from betel nut and eyes like cracked porcelain, recited the final sutras in a strained whisper, barely heard over the crackling fire. The pyre hissed as the monsoon mist licked at its edges. And when the flames finally died, all that remained was a bed of charred banana leaves and the faint outline of a woman's bones. Her son stood barefoot in the muddy earth, drenched, trembling not from the cold, but from the weight of everything unsaid. His name was Atit, 17 years old, head freshly shaved, orange robe clinging to his body like soaked cloth over stone. Now he was a novice monk, cloaked in saffron and silence, ordained in the shadow of her death. Not out of devotion, not out of faith, but out of debt. It was the last thing she had asked before she died, breath rasping like paper against flame. Promise me, you'll take the robe, just for one season, just enough to carry me over. In Thailand, it is said that a son who ordains helps his mother cross the river of suffering in the afterlife. But no one says what happens when the crossing is interrupted. After the ceremony, the villagers bowed low, whispering condolences that melted like steam in the rain. The abbot placed a single white lotus in Atit's trembling hands and muttered a blessing, though his eyes were far away. He did not meet the boy's gaze. No one did. And so, with the ash still warm, Atit entered the temple grounds alone. The temple, Wat Nong Sai, sat quietly among rows of ancient banana trees, their tall stalks hunched like monks in meditation. The older monks called it sacred ground, but villagers told stories, soft, half-laughed tales, that the banana grove at the edge was haunted. They said no tree in that corner ever bore fruit, that no dogs would enter its shade, that some nights, if you looked too long at the leaves, they would look back. Atit had never believed in ghosts, but grief is its own haunting, and doubt seeps in when you have no one left to cling to. His kuti, the small wooden monk's hut assigned to him, was nearest to the banana grove. The window faced a tree whose trunk bore strange markings, deep scratches as if something inside had tried to claw its way out. The other monks avoided it without ever speaking of it. When Atit asked about it, one novice only said, "Don't sweep too far into the shadows. They don't like being disturbed." That night, Atit lay on his thin straw mat, listening to the rain drum on the tin roof. The chanting from the main hall had long faded, replaced by the chorus of crickets and the occasional creak of shifting wood. But sleep refused to come. His mother's face kept surfacing behind his eyelids. Not the way she had looked in life, warm, smiling, her voice like morning sun, but pale, still, her lips blue with silence. He saw her wrapped in banana leaves, eyes half open, mouth slightly ajar, as if she had tried to call out but was muffled by soil. He awoke with a start. It was still dark. Outside, the wind had stopped, but the banana leaves were rustling. Not softly, like wind-blown grass, but with weight, with intention, like footsteps brushing through a curtain. He sat up. The air felt thick, charged. He stepped out onto the porch of his kuti, breath caught in his throat. The trees stood silent, still, except one. The same tree, with the clawed bark, was swaying slightly, though no wind moved the others. Its tallest leaf bent toward him, as though bowing or beckoning. Something lay at its base. Cautiously, Atit stepped forward. Mud clung to his toes as he crossed the courtyard barefoot. The temple bell, hung high on its wooden frame, remained utterly still. As he approached the tree, he saw the offering. A folded lotus, still fresh. A small mound of uncooked, sticky rice. And a single banana leaf, curled into a cone, blackened at the edges. Inside it was his name, written in red, but not ink. He staggered back. His mouth opened, but no sound came. A chill seeped into his spine, the kind that doesn't come from weather, but from memory trying to warn you before your thoughts catch up. The moment stretched like a shadow at dusk. Then a soft sound, foot, foot, like cloth dragging across wet ground. He turned toward the sound. Nothing. But he felt it. Something watching. Something behind the trees. He backed away slowly, not daring to turn his back until he reached the steps of his kuti. Once inside, he slid the door shut and collapsed against it, heart pounding. The folded lotus still bloomed in the rain. The banana leaf still held his name. By morning, it was gone. No trace of the offering, no print in the mud, no sign that anyone had been there. But Atit's robe bore a mark, a damp stain on his left shoulder, shaped eerily like a hand. And when he looked in the mirror, he noticed the faint outline of bruises forming along his arms, long, slender, finger-shaped. He said nothing to the other monks. At breakfast, the abbot offered him rice and a glance that lingered too long, as if he knew, as if he too had seen things he never spoke of. When Atit asked if there were any funeral rites left unfinished, the abbot only said, "What's buried, stays buried. Sweep only the courtyard, child, and never, never touch the trees." But that night, as the moon began to swell toward fullness, Atit stood once more by the cursed banana tree. And though the ground was bare, he swore he could still smell the smoke of his mother's pyre and hear her voice in the leaves, calling him back. The sun returned the next morning, burning away the mist that had blanketed the hills like a funeral shroud. Birds chirped as if nothing had happened. The banana trees stood tall and indifferent, leaves shining with dew. And yet, something in Atid had changed. He had not slept. The bruises on his arms had darkened into the color of rotting plum flesh. When he touched them, they throbbed, not with pain, but with pressure, as though something beneath his skin was trying to rise. He told no one. At breakfast, he sat in silence among the novices, chewing boiled pumpkin without tasting it. No one mentioned his pale face. No one asked about the dark smudges beneath his eyes. But he felt their glances, the way they looked away too quickly, the way they avoided sitting beside him. Only one monk dared break the silence. His name was Fra Yod. He was older than the other novices, quiet, serious, with the kind of eyes that had seen things and chosen to stay silent. As the others left the refectory, Yod lingered behind. Without turning to Atid, he said, softly, "It left you something, didn't it?" Atid froze. Yod didn't wait for an answer. He simply placed a small clay talisman, round, palm-sized, etched with old script, on the floor between them. "Keep it close, especially on moon nights." "Why?" Atid asked. "Because you're being watched." And with that, Yod stood and walked away. That night, Atid lit a single candle in his kuti and placed the talisman beside it. He stared at the flickering flame for hours, listening to the rustling of leaves outside. The wind had picked up, but only one tree swayed. The same tree, the same clawed bark, the same place where the offering had appeared. He could feel it, the pull, like a thread tied to the center of his chest, leading him back to that spot. He tried to pray, chanting softly under his breath, but the words felt hollow in his mouth, the mantras twisted, syllables slipping out of order. And for a moment, he was sure he heard a second voice whispering beneath his own. A woman's voice, low, crooning, like a lullaby sung in reverse. He forced himself to sleep, but the dream came immediately. He stood beneath the banana tree, barefoot, surrounded by fog. The ground was soft, almost sponge-like, as if freshly dug. In front of him stood a woman, her back turned, wearing a white mourning cloth that billowed like mist. She held a fan made of banana leaves, hiding her face. "Meh!" he called. "Is that you?" She turned slightly, but not fully. Her head tilted, the fan lifting just enough to reveal a sliver of cheek. It was gray, translucent, vein spider-webbed beneath the skin. "You left me there," she whispered. "I waited, but they never called my name." Atid tried to speak, but his throat closed. She moved closer. "You burned me, but didn't guide me." He stepped back, but his feet were rooted. He looked down. The earth had turned to ash, and it was swallowing his legs. "Take the robe off," she said. "Give it back. It means nothing." And then her voice changed, deeper, hollow, no longer his mother's. "Return what was stolen." She dropped the fan. Atid screamed. He woke gasping. His blanket was shredded, torn into strips. The talisman had cracked in half, and across the wooden floor, leading from the window to the doorway, were wet footprints, bare, small, facing inward. The next day, Atid returned to the banana tree, not because he was brave, but because he needed to know. It was midday. The sun cast sharp shadows through the leaves. The air was heavy with humidity. A dog barked in the distance, then fell silent. At the base of the tree he knelt. The dirt was undisturbed, no offerings, no sign of anything unnatural. But when he reached out to touch the trunk, just to prove to himself it was only bark, he noticed something strange. There, etched faintly into the side of the tree, barely visible unless the light struck just right, was a mark, a symbol, circular, like a wheel made of eyes. And beneath it, a name. His name, carved with something sharp. He stumbled back, heart thundering. That's when he noticed. The banana tree's tallest leaf had turned slightly, angled not toward the sun, but toward his kuti. That evening he approached Fra Yod again. "What is that tree?" he asked. "Don't ask questions you don't want answered." "It knows my name." "That's because someone gave it to her." "Her?" Yod looked around, then whispered, "The spirit in the tree, the one who wears white. She's real. The villagers call her Nang Tani." Atid swallowed hard. "Is she evil?" Yod paused for a long time. "Not evil, just owed." That night, Atid tried to meditate in the main hall. He thought that if he sat in the presence of the Buddha statue, chanted the old mantras, cleared his mind, the darkness would stay away. But as he closed his eyes, something shifted. The temperature dropped. He opened his eyes. All the candles had gone out. And in the darkness, standing at the entrance of the hall, was the silhouette of a woman. Still, silent. She raised her arm and waved the banana leaf fan slowly, side to side. And though her face was hidden, he felt her smile. The next morning, the abbot summoned him. The old man sat on the floor, back straight, eyes hollow. He placed a bowl of rice between them. "You saw her, didn't you?" Atid nodded. "She's not your mother. Whatever she shows you, whatever faith she wears, it's only a mask." "What does she want?" Atid asked. "A name." "Whose?" The abbot's expression darkened. "Any name. Yours. If she can take it, she can replace it." He leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "She waits beneath that tree, because it's not a tree anymore. It's an altar, a doorway, a debt collector." That night, Atid placed the broken talisman beneath his pillow and wrapped his arms in white linen soaked in blessed water. But sleep still found him. In the dream, the woman stood at the base of the banana tree. Only this time, there were dozens behind her, faceless, wrapped in banana leaves like burial shrouds, all of them reaching out to him. Their fingers brushed his skin like dead leaves. He screamed, he begged, but they only whispered over and over, "Take the robe off, give it back, we were never named." And just before he woke, the woman leaned close and said, "We are all still waiting for your funeral." The bruises grew darker each day. They crept like shadows beneath Atid's skin, purple fingerprints blooming across his arms, his ribs, even the base of his neck. No matter how tightly he wrapped them, no matter how much blessed water he soaked them in, they returned each morning, freshly imprinted. The other novices said nothing, but their silence grew louder. They no longer sat near him during meals, no longer bowed at the same pace during chanting. One even avoided eye contact so forcefully that he walked into a pillar and mumbled an apology to the air. Only Fra Yod watched him with knowing eyes. "She's trying to soften you," Yod said one morning, as they swept the temple courtyard side by side. "What do you mean?" "She needs your fear. bruises are only the beginning. Why me? Yod didn't answer, but the wind did. It stirred suddenly through the banana grove, lifting dry leaves into a swirl of motion, and with it came the smell, faint but unmistakable. Charred banana leaf, soaked rice, and old ash. The scent of a funeral that had never ended. That night, Atid dreamed again. He stood in a room made entirely of wood, walls, floor, ceiling, but the walls pulsed like lungs, expanding and contracting with breath. There was no light, but somehow he could see. Everything was tinted green. At the center of the room sat a figure, wrapped in white mourning cloth, head bowed, face hidden by a banana leaf fan. "Who are you?" he asked. The woman slowly raised her head, and beneath the fan, where a face should be, there was nothing, only a hollow, empty space, a black void where identity had been erased. "Name me," she said, without a voice. "Give me back what was taken." He stepped closer. "I don't understand. What was taken?" Suddenly, hands burst from the floor, cold, grasping hands, pulling at his robe, dragging him down into the wooden planks. The woman stood and lowered the fan. Her face began to form, not one face, but many, shifting features flickering in and out like smoke. A mother, a daughter, a stranger, a corpse, and they all whispered the same thing. "One soul, that's all we ask," he screamed. He woke with a gasp, soaked in sweat, sitting upright in the dark. The candle at the foot of his bed had burned out, but in its place something had been left on the floor. A banana leaf fan, still damp, still warm, and across his chest, where the robe had slipped away in the night, was a new mark, this one not a bruise, but a burn, shaped like a closed eye. Atid took the fan to the abbot the next morning. The old man didn't even blink when he saw it. He reached for a jar of oil and began rubbing his fingers along the burn, muttering a chant under his breath. "You're not the first," he said. "What do you mean?" "This temple, it holds more than prayers." He gestured toward the banana grove. "There's a reason we plant them around the grounds. Banana leaves are used in death, wrapping bodies, shielding faces, lining the mouths of the unclaimed. They are the veil between this world and the next." Atid stared at him. "You knew this would happen to me?" The abbot didn't deny it. "You were marked the day you took the robe." "I didn't take it for myself, I did it for my mother." "Exactly." His voice lowered to a whisper. "And she is no longer the one calling you." Later that day, Atid wandered the grounds alone. He passed the novices' dormitory, the empty prayer hall, the lotus pond now choked with algae. The air was still, even the dogs were silent. He stood beneath the cursed banana tree again. Something about it felt aware. Its broad leaves didn't sway like the others. They listened, they remembered. Their veins pulsed faintly like nerves under skin. At the base of the tree, half buried in the soil, he noticed a bundle, cloth tied in twine, soft with rot. He hesitated. Then, with trembling fingers, he dug it free. Inside, bones, small, charred, wrapped in a scorched banana leaf, and tucked in the folds, a scrap of fabric with a name inked on it. Not his, someone else's. He brought it to the abbot again. The old man didn't even blink when he saw it. He reached for a jar of oil and began rubbing his fingers along the burn, muttering a chant under his breath. "These are the forgotten," he said. "There are more." "How many?" "Dozens, maybe more. They were never given proper rites." "Why not?" "Because no one claimed them. And we," he paused, "we chose expedience over holiness." "You burned them here?" he whispered, "in secret, late at night, with banana leaves as shrouds, but no chants, no names, no blessing." Atid stared at him in disbelief. "You turned the tree into a graveyard." "No," he whispered, "we turned it into a promise broken." That night, Atid chanted alone in the main hall. He poured water for the dead. He offered incense and recited the names of those he could find, written in faded ink on scraps hidden beneath the banana trees. But the wind didn't rise. The candles flickered, and the chant caught in his throat when, from the dark edge of the hall, he heard it again. "You burned me, but you didn't guide me." He turned. There she was, standing in the doorway, wearing white, fan lifted, eyes like coals. She began to walk forward, slowly, one foot after another, without sound. Atid backed away. "I'm trying," he whispered. "You're too late," she said. "The rites must be spoken before the fire." She raised her hand, and the fan burst into flame. "Now it's your name that must be burned." The next morning, Fra Yod found Atid collapsed near the altar, robes soaked, lips blistered from chanting. The abbot placed a wet cloth on his head and spoke only 4 words: "The full moon is coming." And outside, beneath the cursed banana tree, the leaves began to turn inward. The days moved slower now. Each sunrise arrived like a prayer left unanswered. The temple grounds, once filled with birdsong and wind chimes, had grown unnaturally quiet. Even the trees stood still, as if the air itself feared to move too much, lest it disturb what watched from the shadows. Atid no longer dreamed, not in the ordinary sense. He didn't sleep long enough to reach them. Every time his eyes closed, he felt hands brushing his forehead, pressing into his chest, whispering into his ears. Hands not made of flesh, but of memory, cold and ancient and hungry. He woke each time gasping, eyes wild, mouth full of the taste of ash. Fra Yod stayed close now. He no longer spoke in riddles. "She's stronger when people stop believing she's real," Yod said, pouring salt in a thin line across the doorway of Atid's kuti. "Who is she really?" "No one knows. Some say Nang Tani is a cursed woman. Others say she was never human to begin with, just a spirit that took the form of grief." He handed Atid a string of old prayer beads. "But here, in this temple, she's something else, something born of what we refuse to speak." That afternoon, Atid visited the village. He walked barefoot down the dirt path, saffron robe fluttering weakly in the breeze, the prayer beads clutched tight in one hand. The market women glanced at him and looked away. Children stopped playing to silently watch him pass. Only one old woman approached. Her eyes were pale, clouded with age, but sharp with knowing. "You're the one marked by the tree," she said. Atid bowed politely. "Do you know what it is?" She spat into the dust and muttered a prayer. The spirit in that tree is not just Nang Tani, it is many. It's what happens when the forgotten become furious. They used banana leaves as shrouds. Yes, and never sent the dead across. The woman leaned close. If a name is not spoken after death, the spirit remains, trapped, bitter. Eventually, they forget who they were. All that's left is the longing. Can they be helped? She shook her head. Only if they're willing to be named again. But if they've waited too long, they want more than remembrance. They want replacement. Atid felt the chill return, sliding down his spine like water. They want my place. She nodded slowly. One soul for the many. That night, Atid didn't light a candle. He let the dark come. He sat in meditation, eyes closed, breath steady, listening, not for silence, but for what lived beneath it. And it came. Rustling leaves, the faint tap of bare feet on wood, the creak of his kuti door opening, though it was locked. And then, the scent. Sweet, rotting banana, wet ash, old fire. A voice whispered near his ear. You were never meant to survive her death. He opened his eyes. She was sitting beside him, so still, so close, wearing white mourning robes stained with earth, her head bowed, her long black hair twisted with twigs and bone, and in her lap his mother's photo, soaked and torn. He reached for it, but she looked up, and this time her face wasn't empty. It was his own face, but sunken, bloated, corpse-like, lips sewn shut with banana fiber thread. He screamed. She vanished, and the photo fell into his lap, now burned at the edges. Atid ran to the abbot. The old man was waiting. He sat cross-legged beneath the main Buddha statue, surrounded by incense smoke. She showed you your end, the abbot said calmly. How do I stop her? You cannot. Must be something. There is nothing. The abbot looked older than ever, his robe loose on his bones, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. What haunts us now is not just a ghost. It is the weight of all that we silenced. This temple took in the bodies no one wanted, and we sent them away without names, without chants, without care. You were helping them. We were hiding them. The abbot's voice cracked. Some of them were criminals, others suicides, people who died alone. Their families didn't want them. So we used banana leaves instead of robes, burned them in secret, no prayers, just fire. And now they are not gone, they are collected. By her? The abbot nodded. She is the memory of every death we refuse to mourn. Atid left the temple that night, barefoot, holding nothing but the cracked photo of his mother. He walked back to the tree. The moon was almost full. The grove was alive, leaves shifting, whispering without wind. The trees leaned closer together, their long stalks groaning with weight. And the central tree, her tree, had changed. The trunk had split slightly, revealing something inside. Fabric, layers of it, old blackened robes, burnt banana leaves, bones, dozens of them. It was not a tree, it was a shrine, or a tomb, and it was pulsing. He dropped to his knees. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know. The leaves above him rustled once, and from within the trunk, a hand slid out, thin, female, blackened with fire. Fingers cracked and peeling. It reached toward him, not to strike, but to offer something, a folded banana leaf. He opened it. Inside was his mother's name, inked carefully, lovingly, in her own handwriting. "You burned her too quickly," came the voice behind him. He turned. The woman in white stood there, but her fan was lowered. Her face was empty, not blank, not hollow, but unfinished. "Give her a name. Give us all a name." He fled. He didn't stop until he reached the pond behind the temple. There, he lit a candle. He placed the banana leaf beside it, and he began to speak names. Any names he remembered. Names from the villagers, names from the ledger, names he'd seen carved into old temple doors, names he wasn't even sure were real. For hours, he whispered them into the dark, and the water shimmered faintly. But in the tree grove, the spirit was not appeased. She watched him from afar, and in her arms, she cradled the next offering. Not a name, but a robe, orange, folded, still warm. The rain returned. Not a cleansing rain, but a thick, stagnant drizzle that smeared ash into mud and soaked the temple grounds in a silence deeper than stillness. The kind of rain that muffled bells, that drowned prayers before they reached the sky. It came the same night the drunkard died. His name was Somchai, a wanderer, a drunk, sometimes a beggar, not well liked, not well mourned. He collapsed at the edge of the temple grounds under the cursed banana tree, his face turned up toward the moon. No one knew how long he had been lying there before a novice found him, body bloated, lips blue, one hand outstretched toward the tree. They burned him quickly. No family came, no rites were held, no chants were spoken. "He would have wanted it that way," one monk muttered. "Too many sins," said another. "Best not to stir up what's already cursed," whispered a third. Atit watched the smoke rise, remembering what the abbot had told him. No prayers, just fire. That night, the dreams returned with force. But it wasn't the woman this time. It was Somchai. He stood in the doorway of Atit's kuti, soaking wet, face slack and expressionless, skin gray and bubbling. "No one spoke for me," he said. "I was burned like garbage. You watched." His voice sounded like water gurgling through rotted wood. Atit tried to move, but his body was frozen. His mouth refused to form a chant. Somchai stepped closer, and his fingers were leaves, wet, green, curling banana leaves that peeled back slowly to reveal bone. "We promised the fire would take us, but we're still here." He opened his mouth to scream, and black smoke poured out. Atit woke choking. He fell to the floor coughing, clutching his throat. When he finally caught his breath, he looked around. His bed was covered in soot, fresh, still warm, as if something had burned inside his room. He confronted the abbot the next morning, voice raw. "You burned him without a single prayer." The abbot didn't look up from his beads. "Would it have made a difference?" "You don't know that." "I know that when we chanted for the last one, she appeared in the fire." "Who?" "A girl, 5 years ago. Died alone in the forest. No one claimed her. We chanted to cleanse her before cremation." The abbot's hands trembled slightly. As the flame rose, she walked out, burning, silent, her face melting, but her eyes watching. She didn't scream, she only stared. Since then, no more chants. We burn, we forget, we move on. But they don't, Atit said. The bruises returned in new shapes, wider, colder, no longer handprints, but long smears across his chest, as if dragged by something wet and heavy. And now others began to feel it. One novice woke with scratches down his back, claiming he dreamt of being wrapped in banana leaves, unable to breathe. Another refused to sleep indoors, muttering that he could hear names being whispered in the walls. One left in the middle of the night and never returned. But still, no one said the word, ghost, as if silence could protect them. Atit went to Prayot again. What happens if we keep burning them this way? Yot looked at him grimly. Each one adds to her. Her, Nang Tani. She absorbs them, not just the spirits, but the sins. Every forgotten death strengthens her. She isn't one ghost anymore. She's all of them. Atit remembered the dream, the woman's face made of many, always shifting, always incomplete. They're becoming her, he whispered. Yort nodded. Or she's becoming them. Either way, she's not satisfied. That night, the temple bell rang once, low, unmistakable. No one had touched it. The monks gathered in silence, eyes wide, robes clutched. The abbot stood beneath the bell, pale and shaking. Return to your rooms. Do not open your doors. Do not respond to your names. What is it? Someone asked. The abbot turned toward the banana grove. She is calling the dead by the names we never gave. Atit sat alone in his kuti, every candle lit, prayer beads clutched so tightly they cut into his palm. The air grew thick. Then the knocks began. Not loud, just gentle taps. 1, 2, 3. Atit? The voice was soft, female, familiar. Atit, it's me. I need you. His blood turned to ice. It sounded like her, exactly like her. Come outside, my son. I left something for you. He covered his ears. He began to chant, Atit, please, why won't you help me? He shut his eyes. Don't you remember how I used to sing to you? And then he heard it, his lullaby, the one she used to hum when he was sick, when she held him to her chest and rocked him through the fever. He almost stood, almost opened the door, until something whispered through the crack, Give me your name, and I'll let her go. He screamed. The door burst open, but there was no one there. Only a folded banana leaf on the floor. Inside it, a lock of his mother's hair, and beneath it, a single word written in red, Return. By morning, the novices had found the drunkard's grave disturbed, the ashes scattered, banana leaves hung from the tree like broken skin, and high in the branches, a robe, orange, freshly laundered, still dripping. The ground had begun to breathe. Atit first noticed it while sweeping the edge of the banana grove. The earth beneath his feet seemed to shift, not as though it were loose or wet, but as if something just beneath the surface had exhaled. The soil was warm, softer than it should have been, and the smell thick and sweet, like ripe fruit left to rot in the sun. Banana and blood. The abbot called a meeting. All remaining monks sat cross-legged on the wooden floor of the main hall. Rain tapped nervously against the roof. No one is to go near the cursed tree. It is not a tree anymore. Then what is it? A young monk asked. A wound, the abbot answered. One we opened, one that's now festering. He paused, looking at Atid. And it wants to be fed. That night, Atid made a decision. He returned to the grove, candle in hand, no prayer, no beads, just quiet resolve. The banana trees stood like pillars in the dark, their long leaves trembling without wind. As he approached the center, the oldest tree, he felt the air turn thick, wet, almost sticky, like walking into the mouth of something alive. He knelt beside the base and began to dig. The soil parted easily, as if eager to be opened. His fingers sank into warm, pulpy earth, deeper, deeper, until he found it. Bone, small, human, charred, wrapped in brittle banana leaf shrouds, folded with a care that felt mechanical, efficient, rushed, and more than one. As he kept digging, he uncovered layer upon layer, bones, teeth, pieces of monk robes, old funeral fans, strings of prayer beads blackened by smoke. The deeper he dug, the wetter it became, not water, ooze, thick, dark, clinging to his skin like old blood. And then he hit something else. Wood. No, not wood. Lacquered cloth. He pulled it up. An old journal, soaked but intact, bound in twine. The ink had bled in places, but some entries remained legible. 3rd moon, year of the ox. Another body delivered under cover of night. No kin, suicide, no name. Wrapped in leaf, burned by dawn. Abbot insists on silence. Too many deaths, too many mouths to feed. The leaves hold them. They remember. I hear chanting from the roots. I think the tree has begun to whisper. We buried a novice last week. He was found smiling. No bruises, no breath, just ash in his throat. He was not scheduled to die. His hands trembled as he closed the book. The earth began to moan. Not aloud, but through vibration, through a hum that rose up his knees into his ribs, a sound too low for ears, but loud in the soul. He looked up. The banana tree had opened. The center of the trunk had split wide like a gaping mouth, and deep inside he saw them. Faces, dozens, pressed against the inner bark, eyeless, ageless, skin like paper soaked in smoke. They were all mouthing the same word. Name us. Atid ran. He didn't stop until he collapsed at the steps of the temple, covered in mud, in rot, in the memory of what should have stayed buried. Prayod found him and carried him inside. What did you see? He asked. Atid handed him the journal. We were never a temple, Atid whispered. We were a crematorium with no soul. The abbot read the book in silence. When he finished, he closed it slowly and said, It was survival. It was slaughter. No one else would take them, so you threw them into the fire like garbage. And now they want a soul in return. Why mine? Atid asked. The old man looked at him, hollow-eyed. "Because you were the first one who dared to ask." That night, thunder rolled across the mountains. Lightning revealed the grove in sharp, terrifying flashes. The tree swayed harder than the wind allowed, and beneath its roots, the ground began to tear open. A hole, a grave, a mouth, widening, calling. Atid sat in his kuti, staring at the folded banana leaf that had reappeared on his floor. Inside, a single word had been carved, not written: soon. And pressed against it, his mother's old hairpin. The one she had worn when she died. The one she was buried with. He had seen it burn, and yet it was cold in his hand. The next morning, half the banana trees had turned black. Leaves drooped, fruit rotted on the stalk, birds no longer sung. Villagers whispered, "The temple is cursed. Something has awakened. A soul must pay." Atid knew what he had to do. He walked to the center of the courtyard, dropped to his knees, and began to chant. Not the new mantras, not the clean ones, the old ones, the buried ones, the mantras meant for the unspoken dead, the abandoned, the unnamed. As his voice rose, the air thickened, and from the edge of the grove dozens of spirits watched. Some wore robes, others wore white clothes. One still held a fan, but all were silent, waiting.
The fan appeared at dawn, laid gently across the threshold of Atid's kuti, as if placed by hands too light to disturb the dust. A traditional mourning fan, woven from fresh banana leaves, curved with grace, trimmed in black cloth. But it was not new. It was damp, and it smelled faintly of smoke and soil. Atid knelt before it. He did not touch it, not yet. He only stared. The edges of the fan curled inward, forming a crescent, like it had been clutched tightly for a long time, by someone too dead to loosen their grip. Prayad approached in silence. "She gave it to you," he said. "What does it mean?" Yad's face was grim. "It means you've been chosen, not to die, but to remember." "Remember what?" "Her. All of her. All of them." Yad looked toward the banana grove, where the cursed tree stood hunched under the weight of invisible eyes. "The fan is the last thing a mourner holds before they let go," he said softly. "And the first thing a ghost gives when they're ready to be seen." That night, Atid placed the fan at the center of the prayer hall. He lit 108 candles, one for each name he had read in the journal. He sat in silence, waiting. Midnight came, and with it, she returned. Not as a nightmare, not as a whisper, but fully and without disguise. The woman in white stepped from the shadows, the banana leaf fan pressed gently to her lips. She walked barefoot across the hall, eyes never leaving his, though her face remained veiled. When she reached the fan he had placed on the floor, she stopped. "You found the roots," she said. Her voice was layered, many voices speaking at once, male and female, young and old, all the dead in one mouth. "You've seen what was buried." I nodded. "I've tried to name you. Names are not enough." "Then what do you want?" The woman tilted her head. "Ritual, remembrance, reversal." "Reversal?" "One soul, one offering, one sacrifice to call the others back." The air around them began to shift. The flames of the candles elongated, leaning toward the woman as if pulled by gravity. Atid whispered, "Who are you?" The woman slowly raised her fan and lowered it from her face, and for the first time, she showed herself. She had no skin, only ash, only layers of other people's features, mothers, monks, children, strangers, shifting like reflections in disturbed water. Every time he tried to focus on one, it disappeared. Her eyes were hollow, but glistening, and in her mouth, no tongue, no teeth, only soot. We were forgotten, burned like offerings, fed to the tree. You are not cursed, you were abandoned. She stepped closer, and when she placed the fan into his hands, it was warm, pulsing. You must burn the robe, not yours, theirs. Whose? The robe of the first monk who lit the fire. Atid's breath caught. The abbot. She nodded once. He fed us to the flames, without names, without passage. He carries the debt. And if I don't, then we take you. Atid went to the abbot before sunrise. He found him in the lotus garden, watering dry roots that refused to bloom. You gave them to her, Atid said. They were already gone. No, they were waiting for their names, for their rites, and you fed them to the tree. The abbot set the clay pot down. Do you think I wanted this? You allowed this. I survived this. His voice cracked. There was a plague, famine, bodies rotting faster than we could pray. The villagers brought them in wrapped in mats and leaves. We had to burn them or let them fester. You could have remembered them. No one remembers the forgotten. She does, Atid said. Then it's already too late. That night, Atid placed the fan on the altar. He placed the abbot's ceremonial robe beside it, the same one he wore during cremations. He soaked it in lotus oil and ash. He waited for midnight. The moon was full, and as the bell struck 12, the fan ignited. Slowly, quietly, the flame crawled across the robe like a memory reawakened. And then they came. From the grove, dozens of figures emerged, pale, silent, dressed in mourning. Each held a banana leaf in their hands. Each one bore a name carved into their skin. And at the front, her, the spirit with the shifting face, the one who was all of them. She stepped forward, touched the burning robe with her fingers, and said, "Now you see us." And as the robe turned to smoke, they vanished, all except one. Atid turned to find a single figure remaining. His mother, whole, calm, dressed in white, but not mourning, radiant. Her fan was closed, her eyes were hers. She smiled. "You remembered me," she said. He fell to his knees. "I tried. You succeeded." She knelt beside him and placed her hand over his heart. "Now let me go." He woke at dawn with tears on his cheeks. The fan had burned to ash, but the air felt clean. The banana trees swayed gently in the morning breeze. Birdsong returned, and for the first time in weeks, the soil was cool.
In the days that followed, the temple grew quiet again. Too quiet. Not the peaceful silence of a place returned to balance, but the watchful, waiting stillness of something just beneath the surface, like a held breath, like a storm that had passed but left its teeth buried in the earth. The cursed tree had not bloomed since the burning of the robe. Its bark had darkened, and the leaves curled inward as if in mourning. The other monks avoided it completely now. Even the abbot kept his distance. But Atid could not. Each night he found himself drawn to it, not out of fear, but out of a feeling that something had been left undone. It started again with the dreams. They came slowly at first, soft gray shapes floating just behind his closed eyes. His mother's face smiling gently, her voice distant like a lullaby carried by fog. In the dream, she stood beneath the banana tree, her arms open. "Come here, my son," she would whisper. "I've been waiting." Atid woke from these dreams with tears on his cheeks, but peace in his chest. Until the dreams changed. Her arms no longer opened. They reached. Her smile stiffened. Her eyes, once warm, became too wide, unblinking. And her voice, "You burned me," she said, "but you didn't free me." One morning, Atid woke with a burning sensation on his chest. He rushed to the mirror, and there, above his heart, in the faint red outline of scorched skin, was a shape, a banana leaf, folded like a fan, still warm. He tried to cover it with his robe, but he could feel it pulsing, as if the mark itself was a mouth trying to speak. He returned to the journal from the grave. Flipping through its damp, crumbling pages, he found an entry he had missed before. They show themselves as the ones we love, but the face is a mask. The spirit borrows it, like a robe it slips into. If you speak to the face, the spirit hears. If you answer it, it can follow you into the waking world. Atid felt the cold bloom beneath his skin. He had spoken to her, more than once. That evening, the rain returned, a heavy, suffocating downpour that flattened the banana leaves and turned the courtyard into a soup of mud and old ash. Atid sat inside the main hall alone, the candles flickering wildly in the draught. He tried to chant, but the syllables caught in his throat. And then he saw her, standing outside in the rain. His mother, soaked through, head bowed, hair matted to his face. She didn't knock. She didn't move. She just waited. Atid stood slowly. "May." She lifted her head. Her eyes were hollow. Her skin was pale, and yet something inside him still ached to believe it was her. He stepped outside. The rain was cold. It clung to him. She didn't speak, just raised her hand and pointed to the banana grove. He followed. The rain soaked his robe, plastered it to his chest, but he didn't stop. She moved ahead of him, floating more than walking, always just out of reach. When she reached the cursed tree, she turned. "This is where I was left," she said. Atid stepped closer. "You said I helped you move on." "No," she whispered. "You helped them, not me." She raised her hand, and behind her the tree split open. Inside, instead of bones, there was a body. Her body, preserved, eyes open, mouth still wrapped in the cloth they had tied around her at cremation. Atid fell to his knees. "But I burned you," he shouted. "No," she said. "You burned what they gave you. I was already taken, already wrapped, already buried wrong. Who did this? The abbot, she whispered. Atid ran, slipped, stumbled through the mud. He burst into the abbot's quarters, soaked, panting. You lied to me! The abbot looked up, weary. She said you never gave her the rite, that she wasn't burned properly. The old man sighed. She was brought too late. The plague had taken her days before. Her body had already turned. We wrapped her in banana leaves and buried her beneath the others. No chance? There were too many dead, too many mouths still living. She was my mother. The abbot's voice turned hard. She was one of hundreds. Silence. The rain pounded outside, and Atid whispered, Then she has every right to come back. That night, Atid returned to the tree. He carried incense, a lotus, a single candle. He knelt before the opening in the trunk. Her body was gone, but the scent remained, sweet, rotted, familiar. He lit the candle and whispered, I remember you. He spoke her name over and over. Let it fill the air like breath. Let it cut through the rot like flame. The wind howled, the banana trees screamed, and from the grove she stepped forward, but this time she looked real. Her hair was dry, her eyes were soft. She knelt in front of him. Why now? She asked. Why not before? I didn't know how, he said. Then let me show you. She took his hand, and in that moment he saw it all. The plague, the pile of bodies, the rushed burials, his mother's mouth sewn shut with banana threads, the abbot's trembling hands as he covered her with leaves, and her eyes watching, even as the soil closed in. He screamed. He fell back into the mud. She reached out. Let me go, Atid. He crawled forward. I don't know how. Then burn the tree. All of it, all of it. The candle flickered in his hand, and he stood.
They found the offerings at dawn, left quietly on the doorsteps of every home that bordered the temple. Some were tucked in bowls, others hung from nails. A few simply lay in the dirt like forgotten prayers. Each one was the same. A folded lotus, a pinch of white rice soaked through, and a blackened banana leaf, curled at the edges like it had been touched by fire. Some bore names, others bore nothing, but all smelled faintly of decay. The villagers said nothing at first, just stood in their thresholds, staring at the offerings with faces drained of warmth. Then, one by one, they brought them to the temple gate and dropped them in silence, without words, without chants. Some cried, others crossed themselves. No one dared take them home. Atid collected the offerings alone. He laid them on white cloth in the main hall, arranged with trembling care. 57 in total. Some leaves had names scrawled in red ink, names of the living. Others had no names at all, just the faint imprint of fingerprints, or worse, child-sized bite marks along the edges. Prayod stood beside him, silent, pale. What does it mean? He finally asked. Atid stared down at the rows of dead things. It means they're no longer hiding. That night, the wind arrived before the moon. It tore through the banana grove like a scream, bending trees, snapping stalks, ripping leaves like paper. The dogs howled. The bell rang once, then fell silent as its rope tore loose. Atid stood barefoot in the courtyard.
The full moon hung swollen in the sky. He had burned incense, he had chanted, but nothing could hold back the storm that came with her. From the far end of the grove, they appeared. First one, then three, then too many to count. Spirits, wrapped in banana leaves, their faces veiled, their feet not touching the ground. Men, women, children, some missing parts of themselves, hands, eyes, half a face, burned away long ago. Others wept black tears that floated upward. And leading them all, her, the woman in white, no longer hiding, her fan gone, her face complete now, but not her own. It was a composite, stitched from the memories of every mourner who had forgotten them, every body that was burned without a name, every soul that lingered in silence. She stepped forward. The others knelt behind her. You burned our bodies, but you never gave us offerings. Atid raised his hands, holding the fan she had given him, now rewrapped in fresh cloth. I brought the names. Too late. I gave the rites. Too few. She stepped closer. One soul must still be given. The abbot emerged from the shadows, holding a lantern. Take me, he said. Atid turned sharply. No! I fed them to the flames, the old man whispered. If there must be payment, let it be me. But the spirit did not move. She raised her hand and pointed to Atid. He answered us. He walked the routes. He heard our names. I didn't know, Atid said, trembling. You do now, she replied. She opened her hand. Inside was a folded leaf, black and crisp. His name was written on it, twice, once in red, once in ash. The air turned heavy. The ground pulsed. The banana trees leaned inward, forming a circle like a mouth ready to close. And the spirits began to chant, low, harmonic, ancient. Atid dropped to his knees. The words were not in Thai, not Pali, not anything spoken by the living, but he understood them. One soul for the gate, one name for the silence, one fire for the many. He reached for the offering, took it in his hands, and something inside him split. Not pain, not fear, but a deep, unbearable knowing that he was no longer just himself. He had become the vessel. Suddenly, another voice broke through. Take me instead. The abbot stepped forward. He tore his robe from his chest, revealing his marked skin, etched with old burns, scars, and a familiar sigil. The wheel of eyes, the mark from the tree. I marked them, he whispered, not to forget, but to hold them. I couldn't carry them all, but you did. And with that, he stepped into the circle. The spirits paused. The wind stopped. The woman in white looked at the abbot, then nodded. She raised her hands. The trees burst into flame, each one igniting with a sound like weeping. The abbot walked calmly into the fire. No scream, no resistance, only ash. And as the fire rose, the spirits bowed and vanished, one by one, like mist before morning. Only Atid remained in the courtyard. The banana grove was gone. Blackened earth, charred roots, silence. In his hand, the offering leaf turned to ash. And in the center of his palm, something new appeared. A name, not his, but hers, his mother's. Carved gently, lovingly, she was free.
The fire smoldered for 3 days. Where once the banana grove stood, lush and ancient, heavy with silence and ghosts, there was now only scorched earth. No trees, no roots, only ash, black and fine, blanketing the courtyard like fresh snow. The villagers came with offerings, not of fear this time, but of closure. Sticky rice, water, lotus blossoms, names. They whispered those names aloud, laying them gently in the ash. For the first time in a generation, the names of the forgotten were spoken with reverence. But Atid remained silent. He stood at the edge of the charred ground, barefoot, staring at the earth where the abbot had vanished into flame. He had not eaten, he had not slept, he had not chanted, because he knew the truth. The offering had not been accepted. It had only bought time. On the 4th night, the ash moved, not by wind, not by animal, but by will. A soft circle formed in the center of the grove, the soot swirling like breath on a mirror. Atid watched from his kuti as it widened, slowly, deliberately, until it revealed what lay beneath. A pit, a perfect circular opening in the earth, lined with rotting banana stalks. It breathed, slowly, wetly. He lit a candle and stepped outside. The other monks begged him not to go. Fra Yod said, "The fire was the end." Atid replied, "It was a funeral." "No," Yod whispered, eyes wide. "It was a warning." Atid descended into the pit, alone. The walls were damp, pulsing faintly. The scent of decay was overwhelming, sweet and old, like wet fruit sealed in clay. The deeper he went, the darker the air became, not from absence of light, but from memory. Because beneath the grove was not a tunnel, it was a burial womb, lined with banana leaves, soaked in sorrow. Atid felt them watching, felt the weight of hundreds of eyes, not angry, not cruel, just waiting. At the center of the chamber, a single object sat atop a mound of folded robes, a blackened offering bowl. Inside it, his own name etched into a sliver of bone. He reached for it, but a hand emerged from the soil and stopped him. Thin, familiar, his mother's. She said, "One soul must still be given." "Why?" "Because the gate is not yet closed." "You were freed." "I was, but the others." She turned slowly, and Atid saw them, the unfreed, still veiled, still waiting, dozens, no, hundreds, all the ones whose names were never found, never spoken, never written. The fire had burned the leaves, but the debt remained. "Then take me," Atid whispered. "Let me be the one." His mother shook her head. "You're not the debt. Then who is?" "The one who carried the robe." He awoke on the floor of the chamber, the bowl cradled in his arms, the name still etched in bone. But now a second name had appeared beneath his, one he didn't recognize, until he remembered. The first novice who died, years ago, wrapped in leaves, buried without chance. He was not scheduled to die, the journal had said. Now Atid understood. That novice had not been claimed. He had been taken, offered to seal the first flame,
and every soul since had added weight to the scale. The robe was not a symbol of ordination, it was a contract, and now Atid wore it. He climbed from the pit. The villagers stood in a circle. They had come in silence, drawn by something ancient in their blood. Without words, they watched as Atid placed the bowl on the altar and lit incense. He spoke a single chant, one that had not been spoken in generations, a chant not of passage, but of reckoning. The wind rose, the ashes scattered, and the earth shook. The final spirit arrived at moonrise, wrapped in mourning white. But this time, her face was not veiled. Her features were soft, complete, young, human, not a monster, not a ghost, but a woman once denied her name. She stepped forward, placed her hand on the bowl, and whispered, "Enough." The ground stopped trembling. The pit collapsed in on itself. The last of the ash blew into the wind, and the name in the bowl disappeared. Atid sat beneath the ruined altar until dawn. The monks returned to their chants. The villagers returned to their homes. But he remained unmoving, because now he knew the cost of silence, the weight of names left unsaid, the burden of a robe worn not for faith, but for forgiveness. That morning, he removed his robe, folded it gently, placed it at the edge of the grove, and walked into the forest, barefoot, free.
They say some rituals are not meant to be performed, not because they don't work, but because they always do. These are the forbidden chants, the inverted offerings, the reversed bells that summon not salvation, but memory. And memory, when invoked by the wrong hands, is a kind of curse. Atid had heard whispers of such a ritual, the Banyan Bell Rite, but no one spoke of it openly. It was said to predate the temple itself, older than monks, older than mantras, a rite not to honor the dead, but to confront them, not to guide spirits across, but to call them back, not for closure, for reckoning. After his walk into the forest, Atid had not planned to return, but the tree would not let him leave. Though burned, it still stood in his dreams, taller than before, now crowned in white shrouds instead of leaves, and from it the bell would ring, once, twice. Always the third time, it cracked the silence. He would wake each time with the sensation that something had followed him from sleep. So he returned to the temple to finish it. Fra Yad met him at the gate. He looked thinner, older. "They say you walked away," Yad said. "Only in body," Atid replied. "It's not over, is it?" "No." "Then I'll stay with you." "No," Atid said softly. "This is mine." In the temple's archive, a dark, low room beneath the shrine, he found it. A scroll, brittle and yellowed, wrapped in faded red silk, inscribed in looping vertical script, Piti Rakang Po, the Banyan Bell Ritual. The instructions were short, deceptively simple. One bell, one offering of ash wrapped in banana leaf, one chant repeated 7 times under the banyan tree at midnight. But at the bottom of the scroll, in ink faded to rust, "Do not ring the bell unless you are ready to be heard."
Atid waited for the moon to rise. He walked barefoot across the blackened grove. At its center, untouched by fire, stood the banyan tree, a sacred twin to the cursed banana tree. Older, massive, its roots like serpents, its canopy veiling the sky. This was where the temple had once begun, and this was where it must end. He placed the bell beneath its branches, a small bronze thing, etched with lotus petals and closed eyes. No clapper inside, just a hollow shell. He lit 7 candles in a circle, placed the offering, ash wrapped in banana leaf, at the base of the trunk, and began to chant. The first chant stirred the air. The second bent the flame of the candles. The third made the bell tremble. By the fourth, shadows gathered. By the fifth, names began to whisper in the wind. By the sixth, the banyan leaves turned inward as if recoiling. And on the 7th chant, the bell rang. Once, twice. Always the 3rd time, it cracked the silence. The earth buckled, the air cracked, the tree opened, not in bark or root, but in memory. And from its depths, the dead returned, not as ghosts this time, but as judges. Each wore their own face, their own unspoken name, their own final moment. Some wept, some bled, some simply stared, but all turned to Atid and spoke with one voice. Why did you call us? He held the fan in his hand, burned, tattered. To end it, you wore the robe. You heard our names. You saw the ash. Then offer yourself. He stepped forward, placed the fan at the root of the banyan tree, kneeled. Take me. But the ground didn't open. The sky didn't split. Instead, one of the dead stepped forward, a young girl no older than 12, eyes hollow, mouth stitched with thread. She reached out and placed her hand over Atid's heart and whispered, "You are already ours." Pain tore through him. He collapsed, convulsed. But then another hand touched his shoulder. "His mother," she said. "Not him." The spirits paused. "He remembered us. He carried us. Let him carry you too." She turned to Atid. "The weight doesn't end, my son, but it becomes bearable when shared." The bell rang again, soft this time. The girl stepped back. The others followed, into the banyan, into the root, into peace. When Atid opened his eyes, the candles had melted, the scroll was gone, and at the base of the banyan, in place of the offering, was his robe, folded, clean, dry. A single leaf lay on top, fresh, green, alive. The air had grown still again, but not the stillness of calm. It was the stillness before something breaks, the kind that made birds flee the trees, the kind that made dogs whimper before they even knew why, the kind that pressed on the bones. Even after the banyan bell ritual, Atid felt it, an echo, low and deep, humming beneath his ribs. The chant had not ended. It had simply sunk deeper. He could hear it in the wood of his kuti, in the breath of the wind, in the rustle of fallen banana leaves that should have long since turned to dust. And at night, when he lay still enough to listen, he heard it clearly. Nameless, nameless. The robe remained untouched, folded at the base of the banyan tree, as if waiting for a monk that no longer existed. But the leaf placed on top had withered overnight, curling in on itself, dry and cracked, a bad sign. Life offered, life rejected. That's what Fra Yod said when Atid told him. Then the ritual failed? No, Yod answered, his voice hollow. It worked, but not the way we thought. That night, Atid tried to chant. He sat in the main hall alone, cross-legged, spine straight, eyes lowered. He lit the incense, rang the bell, opened his mouth, but nothing came. The words were gone, or rather, they had turned into something else. Each time he tried to speak, a different voice came through. One was a woman's voice, his mother's. Another, a child, high-pitched, ragged. The third, a voice that wasn't a voice at all, but breath scraping over bone. He clutched his throat, panicked. It felt like he was channeling them, and the chants were no longer prayers, they were accusations. He fled to the banyan tree, collapsed to his knees, clutching the earth. "What do you want from me?" he whispered. And from the shadows, the woman appeared again. Not the veiled ghost, not the many-faced spirit, but the same woman in white, the one who had watched him, the one who had waited. Her voice came not from her mouth, but from everywhere. "You wore the robe, but you did not surrender the name. I gave it to you. You gave us names. Then what is left? Yours." Suddenly, Atid was no longer kneeling. He was buried. He blinked, and the earth was above him. He was inside the ground, wrapped in banana leaves, unable to move. His hands were pressed to his sides, his feet bound, his eyes open. But he was not in a coffin. He was in a shroud. And around him, chanting, low, droning, wrong. He recognized the words. They were his own. The ones he had spoken weeks ago when he thought he was guiding the spirits across. Now they were guiding him. He tried to scream, but his mouth was filled with rice, wet, molded, sour. He thrashed, but the bindings pulled tighter. The leaves constricted like muscle. The ground squeezed around him like a womb turned against its child. And from above, he heard her voice. "The chant is not yours to speak. It belongs to the dead." Atid woke gasping, coughing dry rice into his hands. He was back in the main hall alone. But on the altar, where no one had placed it, sat a folded banana leaf. Inside, a chant written in blood. Not ink, not dye, but blood. His. The words pulsed. They shifted when he tried to read them. Each syllable etched itself into his memory, not as knowledge, but as weight. He felt himself sag beneath it, like something ancient had just been inserted into his soul, something that did not belong. And the moment he blinked, he was chanting again, not willingly, but compelled. Fra Yod burst into the hall. "Stop!" he shouted, but Atid couldn't. The chant was pouring from him, low, hollow, wrong. The windows shook, the candles snapped, statues cracked. The Buddha's face split open from chin to crown. Yod grabbed Atid's shoulders. "You're opening the gate again." "I can't stop," Atid rasped. "It's not me, it's them." And then it happened. The floor beneath the altar gave way. Not like it broke, like it peeled, revealing another chamber, one no one had ever seen, one the temple wasn't supposed to have. The scent was overwhelming, charcoal, rot, centuries of damp incense. The pit beneath the altar was lined with banana leaves and bones. Thousands. The monks gathered at the entrance. None dared descend, except Atid. "I have to go down," he said. "You'll never come back," Yod warned. "I'm halfway gone." He stepped into the darkness. The chanting grew louder, but no mouths moved. And as he reached the bottom, he understood. The chant was not sound. It was hunger. And now, it was looking for a body. The full moon rose like an eye that refused to blink. Above the temple, it hung low and swollen, wrapped in a yellow haze. Its light touched every rooftop, every leafless stalk, every cracked tile of the shrine. And finally, it reached the opening beneath the altar, where Atid knelt in the dark, where the chant waited to finish, where the dead had gathered to choose. He had descended into the pit without fear, but now the weight of finality pressed down on his shoulders. The bones were everywhere. Some were still wrapped in charred banana leaves, others scattered loosely, abandoned, as if whoever buried them had lost count. The air was thick with the scent of rot and smoke, and yet something beneath it felt familiar, like home, or what home becomes when it's forgotten. Atid held the leaf with his blood-written chant. Its edges glowed faintly in the moonlight. The ground pulsed, and the whispering returned. They emerged from the shadows, one by one, spirits not hidden now, but seen. Men with ribs exposed, monks with shattered prayer beads still clinging to their chests, women with mouths full of rice, children wrapped in funeral cloths too large for their bodies. And at the center, her, the spirit in white, no longer a phantom, but fully formed, still barefoot, still serene, her face now fixed, no longer shifting, no longer veiled. But even in its stillness, Atid knew it was not hers, it was his mother's. "You summoned us," she said. "I answered the chant," he replied. "Then you know what must be given." He nodded. "One soul." She stepped closer. "And we have chosen." Fradyad called from above the pit, "Atid, come back! You don't belong down there." But Atid didn't move, because deep down he knew he did belong here. The moment he wore the robe, not from faith, but from debt, he had stepped into this place. The spirit raised her hand, in it a folded leaf. She placed it in Atid's palm. Inside, for the first time, was not his name, but his mother's true name, unburned, unsmeared, preserved. "You remembered her," the spirit said. "You spoke her name, you walked through fire for her, you bled the chant, and now," she looked up, into the light of the full moon pouring into the chamber, "she comes to speak for you." The air shifted, the bones stirred, and from the far edge of the chamber, another figure stepped into view. Atid stood, mouth open, his mother, but not as a ghost, not veiled, not shifting, just her, wearing the robe of the dead, carrying a folded lotus, tears on her cheeks. "Ma," he whispered. She smiled. "You freed me, and now I return, not to take, but to offer." She turned to the spirit in white. "He is not the debt, I am." "No," the spirit said. "You were burned, you were buried, your name was returned, you are no longer bound. But I was the reason he wore the robe. I asked it of him. His offering was not his own, it was mine. Atid stepped forward. Please, take me instead. You offered yourself, the spirit said. But it is not the chant that decides. The chamber began to rumble. Bones shifted. Leaves rose in slow spirals. And above them, the full moon began to tremble in the sky, its light flickering like flame. The spirit spoke as one, a low, resonant sound. One soul, one fire, one gate. Suddenly, a light burst from the leaf in Atid's hand. Not fire, but memory. He saw the day he was ordained, the tears in his mother's eyes, her hands clutching his, her voice shaking. Just one season, that's all I ask. He saw the pyre, the flames, the banana leaf curling in the wind. He saw every offering he had missed, every name he hadn't spoken, every moment the dead waited to be known. And then he saw himself, not burning, but chanting at the end of the pit, surrounded by fire, wearing no robe, just silence. He collapsed to the floor. I can't choose, he whispered. Then don't, his mother said. She stepped into the center of the circle, knelt, and closed her eyes. Take me, one final time. The spirit watched, then turned to the others. The silent dead nodded. The chamber grew still, and the spirit in white stepped forward. She placed a hand on Atid's shoulder, then another on his mother's. Then this is the choice. She raised her arms, and the full moon light struck the chamber. The dead began to vanish, one by one, each folding into the wind, each returning to stillness, not rage, not grief, but peace. And when the last ghost faded, so did she, the spirit in white, the many-faced, the watcher, the judge, gone. Atid lay on the floor alone. His mother was gone, but this time she had gone by choice. He climbed from the pit at dawn. Fradyad helped him to his feet. Is it over? The monk asked. Atid nodded. Not forgotten, but forgiven. The banyan tree had changed. Its bark glistened. Its leaves had begun to bud again. And at its roots, where the robe had once rested, now bloomed a single white lotus. No offering, no ash, no chant. Only remembrance.
Years passed. The temple changed as all things do. The walls were repainted, the prayer hall restored. New novices arrived with fresh chants in their mouths and no ghosts in their eyes. Tourists visited during festivals, took photos of the lotus pond, and left coins at the altar without knowing why they felt compelled to whisper when they did. No one spoke of the grove anymore, because there was no grove. Where banana trees once stood in mournful rows, now there was only open earth, soft, green, and dappled with sunlight. Grass grew where ash had once clung to the feet of the grieving. Butterflies returned, but the wind still paused when it passed through that space, as if bowing, as if remembering. Atid stayed, not as a novice, not as a monk, but as a man who had been to the bottom of grief and come back carrying something sacred. He took care of the banyan tree, trimmed its leaves, watered its roots, lit candles beneath it on full moons. Some said he talked to it, but no one ever mocked him for it, because when he walked the grounds, the dogs followed without barking, because the children who ran laughing through the temple slowed when they passed him, because the abbot's old robe, folded and placed beneath the banyan, had never gathered a single speck of dust. The villagers began a new custom. They placed folded banana leaves on the altar, not as curses, but as prayers. Inside each one, a name. Some of the living, some of the dead. Some with just a single word: remember. They stopped fearing the tree, because now it was no longer a wound. It was a grave that healed. One evening, near the end of the rainy season, a novice came to Atid. He was young, curious, bright-eyed. "Pra Ajan," he said politely, "what's that tree for?" Atid smiled. "It listens." "To what?" Atid looked up at the leaves, swaying gently despite the still air. "To the names we forget." That night, the wind picked up. It came quietly, curling through the temple corridors like incense. The full moon rose again, high, golden, solemn. And from the hilltop, Atid watched it, alone, peaceful, but not without weight. He held a folded leaf in his hands, not blackened, not scorched, fresh. Inside, he had written no name, only a single phrase: "I remember." He placed it at the base of the banyan, lit a candle, and sat. Not in prayer, not in mourning, but in recognition. Far in the shadows, unseen by all but the trees, something stirred. Not cruel, not cursed, just present. The outline of a woman dressed in white, hair long, eyes calm. She held no fan, she needed none. She simply watched, then turned and stepped into the earth, leaving behind only the hush of leaves rustling in gratitude. In the morning, Atid woke at the tree's base. The candle had burned itself out, but beside it, where the folded leaf had rested, was something new. A single, perfect banana flower, still closed, still waiting to bloom. Because remembrance is not a ritual, it is a choice, made again and again and again. Even when the ashes have long since scattered, even when no one else remembers, even when the only voice left is the wind.